Hello, everybody. This is the Northwoods Ferry, and as it is the Northwoods, we are having a bonfire in our yard, as you can see. And today, since so many people seem to like my Reddit videos, I decided to do one using my little microphone right here in a soft-spoken voice. And this right here is my best friend / husband. You can call him the Redneck Reaper. He got that name from playing video games back when he played certain video games. And we're going to read some Reddit scary stories. No, I have been having trouble finding really, really scary stories on Reddit, so I'm actually going to tell you some of my scary stories, and he is going to tell you some of his. Okay? So, first, I'll start off by reading the Reddit stories by the campfire, or by the bonfire. Okay? So, let me just pull it up on his phone. This is my phone right here. We'll get a glimpse of you guys don't have to look at us. You can look at the fire going there, maybe. So you can feel like you have the campfire, bonfire experience. Okay, so the first one that I found, now I'm going to read at least one scary Reddit video, or one scary Reddit one of the ones that I thought was one of the more scary stories to you. It's still not as scary as I would have expected from Reddit, but it'll do. So, I went on a mountain hike in Transylvania with a group of friends from school, and way up after maybe 12 to 14 kilometers of trekking, we saw a house. It was in the middle of nowhere. It had a barn with a few animals, a couple of cows, a guy, and 5 to 6 women. Not sure if there were more inside. The dude comes to greet us, barely speaking the language. We had a hard time understanding what he's saying. They lived without electricity, gas, or anything. This was in the early 90s, so there's no internet, no mobile phones to worry about, at least for most people. Anyway, they all looked weird, kind of dumb expressions on their face. We can barely understand each other. They asked us, who's the president right now, and if we want some milk. They looked at our clothes and shoes weirdly, curious, like who knows when is the last time that they had human contact. Or maybe there were more crazies around those parts. I don't know. Not sure to this day what was going on. It's not typical in the region, so we kind of freaked out, especially because the dude looked a bit disturbed, and we were too young. We were looking around us to see if there was more of them. Paranoia was getting to us, thinking there must be a village nearby. What was also weird is that all the women kept their distance and never got close to us, like he was guarding them or checking us out if it's safe for them. One of my friends kept saying, we don't want their milk. We need to go, 'cause it's getting dark. We walked calmly for a while. Then we went when we thought we were out of their sight. bolted like crazy out of there. Needless to say, we camped after a few hours, and we always had one person awake to keep watch. We told people that were living in the villages near the area about the mountain people, and they didn't believe us. They said nobody lives up there in the mountains. And that's where this story ends. And one thing I will say, having been a truck driver and having been living in Kentucky where there's known to be in certain areas mountain people or blue people, it is very well known that there are people, feral people, or a group of people living in the mountains that they do not want to be bothered, but they will come down and get their supplies. But they don't really want to be bothered by society. They don't want to conform. So that to me does not sound so crazy. Now, as I look for more stories on Reddit, I'm going to pass the mic off, and we're going to actually tell some stories of our own, because I seriously have been having a hard time trying to find scary stories on Reddit. And my husband being a truck driver of 15 years? 15 years, and me 5. We've actually both seen some pretty creepy stuff. So, not just in the truck, but in real life, living up here in the woods. He's lived up here most of his life. So I'm going to let him tell his story about the woods, and then maybe another time you can get, or maybe even this time, you can get a creepy story about driving truck. I will explain to you quickly that driving truck can be very scary, especially when you have to drive a night shift in one of the scariest places or in the country. There are many, especially at night. The deserts of Arizona, New Mexico, California, places where not a lot of people go, or people go, but you have to be cautious of who you encounter. Especially, you do not want to break down near Joshua Tree in California desert, which is off of, where is Joshua Tree off of?
I don't recall.
Okay, we don't know, but I can look it up. It's been a while since I've been out there, because as you all may know, I am, like I told you, that's my career. But creepy stuff, sometimes we hope for it. It kind of makes driving a little more interesting. It gets boring at times. I think him and his friend had an encounter with Bigfoot, if you believe in Bigfoot. But me personally, my story will be about when I was younger, and I think it's pretty creepy. I'm actually going to put it on Reddit, and he's going to tell his story about being in the woods the best that he can in a quiet, relaxing voice with the fire going. So here we go. Let's just pass the mic over to him. Either hold it.
Okay, so this story is about me and my kids going hunting. We had shot a deer, and we were getting ready to trail it. And it was getting dark, so we had flashlights, each one of us, myself, my son, and my daughter. And we start tracking the deer. We're walking through the woods. We are about 2 miles back, which anyone who's taken a walk in the woods knows that's quite a ways. So we're trailing this deer, and we start hearing footsteps after it gets dark. And it's not like people footsteps. They're quick and somewhat silent. And my son catches a pair of eyes staring back at him in his flashlight, and then it darted away. So we're following this trail, and we're going deeper into the woods. We're off of any cut trail. We're walking through the bush, as you would say. And we keep hearing more and more of these footsteps surrounding us. And as we find the deer, we're getting ready to go out, and my daughter's flashlight goes out. So now we are down to 2 flashlights, and we start to make our way out of the woods with our prize, and my son's flashlight goes out. And about that time, his flashlight went out, mine started flickering. So we're now 2 miles into the woods, and we can hear these footsteps around us. And in one of the flashes of my flashlight flickering, we see it's a coyote. And he's not alone. He has at least 4 friends with him. And they want what we have. And we can hear them pacing around in front of us, to the left of us, to the right of us, behind us. At times, they seem like they're very close. And we're making our way out of the woods at a rather slow pace. And as we're coming up to the cut trail, which is easier walking and maneuvering, well, that is about the time that my flashlight flickered for the last time. It was not a full moon night. It was not a starry night. It was pitch black. So we had to start letting our eyes adjust better to the dark as we continued to make our way back to the pickup, which is parked at this point about 1.5 miles away. And they're a little less encouraged to cross the open trail, so we can hear them in either side of us in the woods. Every once in a while we can hear them cross behind us. And at this point it seems like they never go in front of us again. But we can hear them still as we're making our way closer and closer to the road. Obviously, by this point, we're all very much on edge, walking out of the woods, knowing that we can't see them, but they can see us. Once our eyes adjust, we only have maybe 4 or 5 feet in front of us that we can see, but we never see them in our vision. And we're walking out of the woods, pulling a quite heavy deer, and making our way back to our truck. They're running around. At one point, we stopped to take a break, and we could hear them running up and down. And it seemed like they were like running at us, and then they would run back, because I think they were scared of us. Maybe not as much as we were of them. But we continued on after that, still hearing them trailing us and following us. It was quite unnerving not being able to see them, but knowing that they were there, not knowing what they were doing, how they were moving, where exactly they were, but we could hear their footsteps. So we continued on and eventually made it out of the woods. And now we all have the story to tell about when the coyotes followed us. So I hope you enjoyed this story, and I'm going to pass Mike back to my beautiful wife.
Okay, guys, I think I found something on Reddit that is actually quite creepy. I lost it for a second here. But let's see if I can find it. There was quite a few I found, actually. Alright. So this one really creeps me out because I actually have a similar story. Okay, so I had awesome parents who let me sleep in the living room on weekend nights when I was very young because my sister was a light sleeper and I could stay up until dawn. But of course, I always ended up sleeping on the couch because Nick at night made me tired. So one night I wake up to the prickly feeling like an instinct, just bolted into a sitting position and stared out the front window. We lived in rural Georgia, so you can imagine the magnitude of trees and perfect light cast from the moon. I see a silhouette of someone in this fucking tree. I should have said effing tree. The family dog dashes to the window and is snarling into the glass. Terrified, I run into the parents' room and try to explain to my parents that there is a strange person outside. Dad grabs something defensive and darts outside with the dogs to beat the wax off the hothead. I tremble in Mama's arms until Dad comes home and says he saw no one and go to bed. I decide to sleep in my regular room. I fill in my sister and as to what happened. Dad is making regular rounds in the house with a cup of coffee. We're all still and I finally think I can sleep. Nope, I notice the man outside my window. From what I can see in the moonlight, he gives me a shush signal and runs away. Just turns around to run a straight line away. I swear, I couldn't stop crying for what felt like hours. See, now I've had experiences like that, and I have found another story just like that. So, I'm going to read this one first, and then I'm going to try to tell you about my scary story. A few summers ago, I went for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. We went our separate ways at the end of the evening, and I had about 2 blocks to ride back by myself. Because of the construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk, but the streets were dead, and it was no problem until right where I was about to turn left onto my street. There was this man walking by himself, maybe 40s, a little scruffy, but not homeless. The sidewalk was narrow, and I didn't want to freak him out. So when I got about 6 feet behind him, I said, "Hey, behind you." Then he turned around and gave me this super angry look. I turned down my street, and he started to follow me, literally screaming about how I was a fucking effing cunt and he was going to kill me and all that. I live right off the corner, and I didn't want him to figure out where I lived, so I decided to do another loop around the block. That's not the scary part. The scary part is that when I looped back around and looked down the street, I saw him standing on my fucking front stoop, staring out at the street like the motherfucker knew where I lived. This is all their words and swearing. Sorry. He saw me ride by again, but he didn't say anything. I ended up going back to the friends, but my bike got stolen from the alleyway by the house 2 days later. Edit. The guy in question was definitely not actually homeless. We have a large population of mentally ill in the area, unfortunately. Downtown, a medium-sized city. So if I didn't think the sidewalk was too narrow to pass, otherwise I wouldn't have disturbed him. Half the scary part was that he looked pretty much completely normal for my area. That being said, I ended up texting my mom, and she made the decision not to notify law enforcement until my bike was stolen. Okay, so I have another story after this that is a little creepy. But first, I'll tell you my story about a creepy person, which I believe was a man. So, I was living in a house, and I was living with an ex-boyfriend, and he would work a lot. He worked 2 jobs. He worked the night shift, and then he worked on the weekends, so full-time and part-time. I was alone a lot in this house. It was 2 stories, and I had this little poodle that was his that I took care of. I wasn't very fond of the poodle, but I became close to it. It was a very yappity dog. I found it barked a lot at almost anyone who came over, but it wasn't very big on barking at anyone walking by or, things like that. Just people coming over, knocking on the door, things like that. And for some reason, this dog was particularly afraid of the basement there. Now, this house was falling apart, and the upstairs was where the bathroom was, and you could feel when you sat on the toilet or used the sink that they were sinking. And one time, the water was left on in the bathroom, and the bathroom was right above the kitchen, and the sink was not draining, and it was not shut off. So we came home to water dripping like rain in the kitchen. So this house was falling apart. I'm not really sure how old it was, but it was a little difficult to live in with all that needed to be done, and he just couldn't afford the repairs or whatever. So in the basement, it had flooded quite a bit because of tree roots, and there was a snake he always used in a pipe to cut the roots. Down in the basement, he would not use a dehumidifier, so it would be flooded for a while and nobody came to look at the basement to make sure it was okay. Besides that, before the first flood, I noticed that the little poodle did not want to be anywhere downstairs. That dog would follow me everywhere in the house. And it confused me why the poodle, because I've had other pets before, and usually they're not typically afraid of basements. At least mine weren't. This dog would literally freak out when I would try to carry it downstairs. It would try to run back up. It would cry. And so the one freaky thing about the house was that the washer was downstairs in the basement where the flooding had happened. When it was dried up, there was mold and all this other stuff, but I had to use the washer. And the electric dryer was upstairs in the kitchen. It was a tiny little electric dryer. So when I went downstairs, the dog would not come with me. No matter what I did, no matter how scared I was, I had to bring the laundry downstairs. It was the most convenient way and cheapest affordable way to wash our laundry. And the dog would not come with me. I was terrified. One thing I can tell you is that I have a sixth sense for when it comes to people dying in certain places. I actually have another Reddit story time that I made where I told my own story of another haunted house my dad lived in. And I have like the sixth sense, or like, I don't know what you'd call that. I don't think it's psychic, but I can sense things. And I've proven it to myself because I thought, if this isn't real, then I'm freaking crazy, because it's scary and it's crazy. So I went down there. I was doing my laundry, putting the laundry in, putting the soap in, and I would get the feeling of being stared at from one particular corner over by the pipe, the big pipe thing, where he would have to put the snake in order to cut the tree roots that grew every spring. I could see the man in my head as if he had died in some kind of construction of the house or something with the sewers, because I lived in a city at the time. He was wearing boots and work like a construction worker, and he would just stare at me. And I kept on telling myself, just get the laundry in the washer, just go and you can run upstairs and everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Well, that feeling never went away. And it was very hard for me to do laundry sometimes, especially being alone, and that little dog barking if he went down there, crying, whining. Sometimes the dog would even stand at the top of the stairs and bark down at the basement. I, to this day, have no clue. I just know what I felt and saw in my mind was a man that would just stand there and he would just watch me. I mentioned it to my ex, who happened to be Latin. And he had a friend who was a Mexican witch. This is no joke. And the Mexican witch told him, did his tarot, which I also do tarot, but not as good as this guy. Like, this was some serious stuff and a cultural thing for him with his family back in Mexico. So he did not charge, and I don't charge, but he was really good, is what I'm getting at. And he told my ex that there was money somewhere in that house. They looked in the attic where they thought it was. They had a feeling about the basement. The man said the tarot man said, well, the tarot witch man said, there's money in this house, but I don't know where it is. There's something weird in this house. It's almost as if someone died here. And I feel like the attic is a good place to hide things, and something's hidden up in the attic. That's very shocking. But I don't think that's where it's hidden. And what they believed was hidden was money. That's what the tarot witch said. So I told them about the guy in the basement, and my ex said that it's very possible, but they looked everywhere in the basement before the flood, before it ever flooded, and they never found anything. In my mind, I always associated and had a feeling that it had something to do with the man that just stood there in the corner looking at me while I did my laundry, putting the laundry in the washer, taking the laundry out. In addition to that particular paranormal type thing, was I was sleeping in one of the rooms one day. We had 3 rooms upstairs, and I was half asleep, and I have a lot of weird dreams, which I may make a video about. Lucid dreaming and night terrors I used to have a lot of. But this was very strange. I was half awake, half asleep, and I felt pretty exhausted because I had worked a lot that week, but I was not completely asleep. And I heard distinctly tapping on the doorway, tapping with long nails. It sounded as if just tapping. And when I actually woke up from it, because I was not fully asleep, I was trying to comprehend what I had heard. It was very creepy for me, and the dog also, was acting funny that particular time. The dog was the main thing, I think, that made me feel safe, even though it wouldn't go in the basement with me. But that is not it with that house. Where we lived is southeastern Wisconsin. And there's a lot of bars in Wisconsin, if you don't know, especially in the cities. Where I live, there was a bar on almost every corner, maybe even more than one bar on a block. Well, we lived not very far from bars where people would walk to get drunk, especially in the summer and in the summer and on the weekends. So this was a bit strange. I mean, people still go to bars a lot more in the winter, but crime goes up in the summer when people are gone doing things. The winter, everyone's typically home. That's something I learned in criminal justice. So my dog had started barking. Like I told you, this dog did not bark at anything really in particular, except if someone knocked on the door or came to the house. And it typically wanted attention if it was a friend of ours. And if you didn't give it attention or pet it, it would bark. But if it was a stranger, it would bark because it was a stranger. So one night I was going to sleep, and it was winter. It was very cold, and it had snowed a lot. And my ex was at work. I had shoveled earlier, but there was snow still falling. Not real bad, though. It had already snowed pretty bad, I guess you could say. And we lived right on the corner of a block next to a lot of houses, across the street from a recycling plant with fences up. And that recycling plant was right by some railroad tracks. So there probably were kids and homeless people in addition to the people walking back home from the bars. Well, on more than one occasion, like that night, I woke up to my dog barking, and it was barking at a specific window. I had the most creepy feeling. I made sure the door was locked. I never really used the back door, but I made sure that it was locked. I was terrified. So I tried to get my dog to go upstairs with me, but he wouldn't. He just kept barking and barking and barking. I peeked out the window. We had the, I don't know what kind of blinds they are, but they're single strands. Like you pull a piece of string and a bunch of them go together. And they were long and covered big windows that do not open in the living room. And there were smaller ones connected to, there was a dining room connected to the living room. And by the living room window, I just had the TV on and it was going just because I like to make it look like someone was home. And, out of fear, I didn't realize living back in a city how much scarier it is living in the woods. But that's besides the point. There's two different types of scary. City scary is people and maybe haunted houses, but wood scary is the unknown of the woods, the darkness, lack of no street lights. There could be crazy people, but there could be crazy people in a city, but you have more people around you. Well, I looked out the window. I tried to peek, and I seen a toothless man. He had not toothless, but one tooth missing. He had glass-like looking eyes. Everyone that I've told this story to says he was probably drunk, and everyone that lives in that city would tell you it was probably a drunk walking home from the bar. But it happened on more than one occasion. And I seen him, and it looked as if he couldn't see me, like maybe he was blind, where to step, and he knew which window to look in. So I was super creeped out, and I tried calling my ex at work, and he didn't answer. When he came home, eventually I made sure that I had weapons. I locked myself in a room upstairs with a dog and a weapon, like a knife or something, because I didn't have a gun or anything. And when he came home, he asked me, why did you have someone over? Sorry, he asked me, what, did you have someone over? Did you have a man over? And I said, no. And I told him what happened. And he said, are you sure? And I said, yes, I didn't have a man over. He said, well, I don't know what to think. He believed me for the most part, but he was a little suspicious. And he had said that this had happened to his ex that lived there, his ex-wife that lived there, and the kids, who I got along with her. And there were footprints by the window. They were boots. They were male boots. They were not my ex. And then there were also tracks walking up to the doorway, the front door, before he ever walked up to the front door. I told him about what happened, and he didn't know what to believe, but he was very freaked out. And he said, well, my ex said that this had happened before too. She felt like there was some man that would come and look through the window, and I've actually found footprints leading up to a window. He said, I think it's a drunk that maybe one day when the curtains were open, because he had a big thing about leaving the curtains shut, leaving the blinds shut. He thinks that maybe when the curtains were open one day and the blinds were open on a nice day, the person could have seen inside, or he spied and knew who lived there. To this day, I have no clue who that man was. He didn't seem drunk to me, but I wouldn't know. There's a lot of drunk people that did go past, making a lot of noise, laying out in the middle of the road, fighting with their spouse who was in a car, things like that. But I've never had specifically that happen like that. Even though I've been robbed or close to being robbed, that was something I can't explain that person. And the dog definitely sensed it also. Even though that dog didn't like people coming over, the dog sensed it. And with that basement being the way it was, I almost wonder if it was connected. So that is my story. I may actually end up putting on Reddit. And I was going to read one more to you, but I don't think it's really that scary. But I'll read it. About 2 years ago, I was driving home from my family reunion pretty late at night, and the drive was about 2 hours. I didn't stay the night because I had to be back for work the following day. Most of the drive was on roads with dense bushes and trees on either side. The real creepy ones you see a lot in movies. Anyway, I had been driving about 45 minutes and I was starting to get really tired. You know how sometimes you just suddenly become really tired out of nowhere? Well, yeah, that happened to me. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park safe and safely sleep. Anyway, after it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up and my tiredness wasn't going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over to the side of the road onto the grass behind some bushes to try and hide my car from anybody else who was going to come past. The roads were empty. I came across another car every few minutes or so. Oh, they weren't empty, I'm sorry. I made a mental note that the time was 11:22 and then fell asleep. Sometime later, I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock, 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds. And because I was still extremely tired, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep. I was later awoken by the same sound, and it was now 12:40. This time it really freaked me out, because the sound didn't stop. The thought ran across my mind that it was an animal inspecting the car, but why would it return almost an hour after it had the previous time? I looked in my rearview mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. Now, at that time, I thought it was the damn hook killer. You know, the one that scratched that couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate. F that, I thought to myself. So I got the hell out of there. There was a bend no more than 100 yards up the road, and as I came around it, there was a effing car parked off to the side of the road with the driver's side door opened. I slowed down just to look to see if anyone was in there. There wasn't. Then I looked in my rearview mirror. I didn't see anything, and all of a sudden, this guy comes sprinting around the corner. He starts screaming at me, shouting stuff like, hey you, get the F out of the car. Now. I noped the F out of there and sped off. I never saw the guy again. Moral of the story? Don't effing sleep on the side of a deserted road. So those are actually some decent stories I found on Reddit. I'm still searching for that ultimate, really scary story, and I have more of my own to tell. So if you know of any really scary Reddit stories, let me know by comment, email, or on my Instagram and Messenger. Let me know you're from my YouTube page. Also, if you have a scary story you want to tell me for me to read, do the same. Email, Instagram, or comment. And that is all I have for you tonight. I hope you enjoyed the stories by the fire. And I will see you guys next time.